Welcome to the podcast, Short Talks.
Imagine you're holding like a multi-million-dollar legal contract.
Right, high stakes.
Exactly, the highest. It's the document that defines your entire livelihood, your future, literally everything. Now imagine a single typo in that contract.
Oh, that's a nightmare.
Right, just one prefix, maybe a pre instead of a post. And that one little mistake threatens to completely invalidate the whole agreement.
The whole thing just crumbles.
Yeah, the boundaries of reality shift over one single word. And, well, in the year 431 AD, the entire trajectory of the Christian world almost fractured in exactly that way.
Over one solitary word.
Over one word. Welcome to today's deep dive. I'm so glad you're joining us for this because our mission today is to unpack a really fascinating piece of religious writing by Metropolitan Constantinos of Singapore.
It's a deeply complex text.
It really is. We are exploring the profound and incredibly central role of the Virgin Mary, who is known in this specific tradition as the Theotokos within the Orthodox Church.
And we really aren't just looking at, a dusky historical footnote here. This document offers a massive window into a cosmological worldview that has quietly shaped human culture, art, philosophy, for nearly 2 millennia.
Yeah, it's huge. Now, a quick disclaimer before we jump in, just so you know where we're coming from. Because this text deals with deep theological concepts and religious dogma, our goal with this deep dive is absolutely not to take sides or to endorse the theology.
Right, we're looking at it from an analytical perspective.
Exactly. We are here to impartially explore it. We want to understand the intricate ideas, the historical battles, and really the psychological weight of the worldview presented in the original source material.
We are essentially acting as explorers, mapping out a very complex intellectual and spiritual landscape.
Okay, let's unpack this. In the text, Metropolitan Constantinos makes it clear right away that the Panagia, which translates to the All-Holy, she's not just some secondary side character in the Orthodox tradition.
Not at all.
Right. She is the absolute center of devotion, second only to Christ himself. She permeates every liturgy, every hymn, and is visually prominent in almost every single church building.
The author actually notes that it is no exaggeration to say the entire daily prayer life of the faithful is steeped in her presence, which, forces a massive question.
Right. Why?
Exactly. What is the theological engine driving that level of intense veneration?
Right.
And to answer that, we actually have to travel back to that contract-altering typo you mentioned at the very start.
Right. So let's go back to 431 AD. The church is holding the Third Ecumenical Council in the city of Ephesus. And from what I understand, this wasn't just like a polite academic seminar with tea and biscuits.
Oh, not at all. Ephesus in the summer of 431 was an absolute pressure cooker.
Wow.
Yeah, you have bishops arriving from all over the known world, and they are locked in a bitter, incredibly high-stakes dispute regarding the very person of Christ.
It's the core of the faith.
Exactly. And the debate centers around the powerful patriarch of Constantinople, this guy named Nestorius.
And Nestorius is proposing a very specific title for Mary, which basically kicks off this whole massive controversy.
Yes, he wanted to call her Christotokos.
Christokos.
Right. In Greek, that translates to the Christ-bearer. Now, on the surface, that sounds perfectly respectful.
Yeah, it makes sense.
It does. But his underlying philosophical argument was that God is entirely pure, infinite, and untouchable. Therefore, God cannot undergo something as, messy and fleshy as human birth.
Oh, I see.
So in Nestorius's view, Mary, who is a human woman, could only give birth to the human Jesus. She did not give birth to God the Word. He wanted to keep the divine and the human strictly separated.
Stepping up to challenge that separation is St. Cyril of Alexandria. And St. Cyril brings a different word to the table, right? Theotokos.
Yes, Theotokos.
Meaning the God-bearer.
And that single prefix changes the entire architecture of the faith? It's wild. St. Cyril and the council ultimately condemned Nestorius' teaching as a severe heresy.
Wow, they didn't hold back.
No, they didn't. They boldly proclaimed that Mary is the Theotokos. And the logic provided in our source is really crucial to understand here.
Walk me through it.
Well, the one she bore in her womb was not a mere man who was later, united with divinity or overshadowed by God like a prophet might be. He was God the Word himself, who became fully man from the very microsecond of his conception.
So going back to the contract analogy for you listening, calling her Theotokos isn't just a polite compliment to honor Mary. It's a load-bearing column.
That's a great way to put it.
It's a strict boundary line defining exactly who Christ is.
St. Cyril wrote passionately about this. He said that if you deny the title Theotokos, you are essentially denying the incarnation of God altogether.
Wait, really?
Yeah. Think about the mechanics of this. If she only gave birth to a human, then God never truly became human. The infinite gap between the creator and the creation just remains totally unbridged.
So the veneration of her isn't some parallel track to worshiping Christ. It's the direct consequence of it.
According to the text, absolutely. If you do not confess Emmanuel as true God, and consequently the Holy Virgin as Theotokos, you stand completely outside the Orthodox faith.
It's a package deal.
Exactly. Honoring her is inherently proclaiming the reality of her son. You simply cannot separate her maternal title from his divine identity.
Okay, I get that. But if her title is the linchpin of God actually becoming human, how did, a teenager in first century Nazareth land this role?
It's a fair question.
I have to push back here on behalf of our listener because from a modern perspective, it's so easy to view her as just a passive instrument. Like, was she just the winner of a divine lottery who happened to be standing in the right place at the right time?
Right, and that is an incredibly common assumption, especially in the West. We tend to view it that way.
Yeah, just sort of chosen at random.
But the text aggressively dismantles the idea of her being a passive vessel. To understand this, Metropolitan Constantinos points us to the teachings of a prominent theologian named St. Gregory Palamas. Palamas describes the Panagia as the boundary between created and uncreated nature.
Wait, uncreated nature? That sounds like, I don't know, deep physics or metaphysics or something.
It does get quite dense.
What does it actually mean for something to be uncreated? And how on earth can a human being act as a boundary to it?
It is a heavy philosophical concept. So in this framework, everything in the universe, galaxies, Earth, humans, even angels, is created. It has a beginning. It is finite.
Right.
God, however, is uncreated. He exists completely outside of time, space, and matter. He's infinite and incomprehensible.
Okay, I follow.
So the massive theological problem is this: how does the infinite enter the finite without destroying it?
So if God's nature is like the raw, unshielded energy of a nuclear reactor and human nature is super fragile, she is essentially the containment rod.
Wow, yeah.
She's the singular interface that allows those two opposing realities to interact without humanity just being totally incinerated.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize it, actually. She is the interface. And Palamas makes it very clear she did not become that containment rod by chance.
It wasn't a lottery.
Not at all. She actively prepared herself through a life of radical purity and unceasing prayer in order to become a vessel capable of holding that uncreated energy.
So she had ultimate agency in this.
Complete agency. In this theology, God does not force the incarnation upon humanity. The text heavily emphasizes the concept of free consent and cooperation with grace. It's a principle called synergy.
Synergy, which, that brings a whole new weight to her famous response at the Annunciation, right? Behold, the handmaid of the Lord, be it unto me according to thy word.
Yes, exactly. The source insists that her response wasn't just a sudden surrender by a frightened girl.
It wasn't just a spur of the moment, sure, whatever you say.
Right. It was the climax of her entire life's preparation. She was literally representing all of humanity in that moment, offering a fully conscious, free yes to the Creator.
But, a human rewriting the rules of the universe with a single yes isn't something you just casually mention in an academic paper. You write poetry about a cosmic shift like that.
You absolutely do.
Which explains why this tradition relies so heavily on singing to express these concepts, right?
Oh, completely. The theology is entirely woven into their hymnography. The text specifically highlights something called the akathist hymn.
Okay.
Which is one of the most structurally complex and theologically dense poetic texts in all of Orthodox worship.
And they are using this poetry to map out the cosmic ripple effects of her choice.
Precisely. The hymn addresses her with dozens of these really beautiful paradoxical titles. For example, Rejoice, through whom joy will shine forth, and Rejoice, through whom the curse will be dissolved.
Through whom the curse will be dissolved. That is pointing squarely back to the Garden of Eden.
It's a very deliberate theological symmetry. The text explains that in the person of the Theotokos, the catastrophic fall of Eve is entirely reversed.
Wow.
Just as the first woman's disobedience brought corruption and mortality into the world, the Theotokos' radical obedience acted as the ultimate antidote. It opened the path to salvation.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. I want you to picture the hierarchy of the universe as it's typically imagined in these ancient traditions.
Right, the cosmic ladder.
Yeah, the ladder. You've got humans down here on Earth, And above us, you have layers of angels. At the very top, you have the cherubim and the seraphim.
Highest orders.
Right, these terrifyingly powerful, fiery angelic orders that exist right at the throne of God. But then the text brings up a hymn called More Honorable Than the Cherubim, which I guess is sung in nearly every Orthodox service.
It is, constantly.
And it literally proclaims that the Panagia is beyond compare more glorious than the seraphim. A human woman is elevated higher than the loftiest, most terrifying angels.
It is a stunning declaration, truly. And Metropolitan Konstantinos is careful to point out that this is not just extreme pious poetry.
It's not just hyperbole.
No. It is a strict, logical, theological declaration.
Walk me through the mechanics of that. Because how does a human bypass the entire angelic realm?
The logic is actually quite impenetrable within their framework. Basically, no creature, not even the highest burning seraphim, ever came as close to the uncreated God as she did.
Because they just reflect him.
Exactly. Angels reflect the light of God, but she actually contained the source of the light within her physical body.
Wow.
Because she gave flesh to the Creator, human nature itself, in her person, is elevated far above the angelic nature.
Okay, so if she is sitting higher than the loftiest angels, it begs a very practical question for anyone, trying to understand this practice from the outside.
Sure.
From the outside looking in, this feels like a spiritual bureaucracy.
I could see that.
If I have a problem, why can't I just take it straight to the CEO? Why do I need to go to the Panagia? Doesn't invoking her constantly just create a totally unnecessary middleman?
It is arguably the most common critique raised by those outside the Orthodox practice.
I'm not surprised.
But to understand the answer, we have to completely abandon the corporate metaphor. We have to look at the Orthodox concept of the communion of saints.
How does that redefine the relationship?
Well, the tradition believes that salvation is not an individualistic enterprise. It is entirely communal.
Okay.
Those who are fully united with God the saints, and above all the Theotokos, they do not just disappear into a cloud and forget about us. They don't cease to care for those who are still struggling in the physical world.
They stay connected.
Very much so. In fact, because they are closer to God, who is love itself, their love and concern for humanity is exponentially intensified.
So they aren't gatekeepers, they're active participants.
Very active. The text quotes St. John of Damascus, who was an 8th century monk and a really fierce defender of this practice.
What does he say?
He calls the Panagia the warm protection of Christians. He explains that because of her unique maternal closeness to her son, she possesses a special boldness before his throne. The Greek word they use is parrhesia.
Parrhesia. Boldness. I like that. And I want to make sure I really wrap my head around this. If it's not a corporation where you're like a low-level employee trying to get a message past an executive assistant, what is the actual dynamic?
It is an expression of family.
Family.
Yes. The source explicitly clarifies that her boldness does not replace a believer's direct relationship with God. She is absolutely not a rival to divine grace.
Right.
You do not pray in isolation. You pray together with the whole body of Christ, which spans across the living and the departed.
So invoking her is quite literally like asking your mother to pray with you.
That is the exact intimacy the text is trying to convey. You are invoking a mother who intercedes for her children with the greatest possible empathy.
Because she was human.
Because she actually lived a messy human life. She wasn't an angel. She knew the pain of losing a child. She knew fear. She knew political oppression. And she knew the agony of waiting.
That drastically changes the emotional landscape. It's not a bureaucratic hurdle to jump over. It's a deeply personal anchor.
It really is. However, we must be very careful here to highlight a crucial guardrail laid out in the text.
Oh, what's that?
The Metropolitan firmly reiterates an absolute rule. The Theotokos receives veneration, but worship belongs to God alone.
That's a vital distinction for you to keep in mind. Veneration versus worship.
It is. The theological terms are dulia for veneration and latria for worship.
Dulia and latria.
Yes. They honor her with the highest special veneration, hyperdulia, actually, because she's the most complete human person ever to encounter divine grace. But worship, the absolute surrender of the soul, is strictly, exclusively reserved for the uncreated Creator.
So we track this deeply intimate physical connection to the Creator throughout her entire life. But that brings us to the natural, inevitable conclusion of a human life.
Her death.
Right, her death. Or, as the Orthodox Church views it, which is functionally very different from a standard death, her dormition.
Yes, the Feast of the Dormition of the Theotokos, celebrated on August 15th. And the text makes a really striking, kind of counterintuitive point here.
Which is?
This is not a commemoration of a death. And it is absolutely not a day of mourning.
Oh, interesting.
It is viewed as a major feast of hope.
And that comes down to what supposedly happened to her physical body, right?
Correct. The Orthodox tradition believes that after her dormition, her falling asleep, the Panagia was translated, both body and soul, into the glory of her Son.
Translated, as in her body did not undergo decay or corruption.
Exactly.
But why? Why couldn't she just die a normal death? And honestly, how does her body not decaying matter to anyone else?
Well, it matters because of the Orthodox view of ultimate salvation. Salvation isn't just about a soul escaping the physical world to go float on a cloud.
Right.
It's about the redemption and transformation of the physical material world itself. St. John of Damascus argues that the physical body that was completely saturated with divine grace, the containment rod, to use your analogy, that body could not undergo the corruption of ordinary death. Matter and spirit were simply too perfectly integrated.
Which means her dormition isn't just an isolated miracle about her, it's a prototype.
Exactly. It acts as the ultimate proof of concept for humanity.
Wow.
It demonstrates what is theoretically possible for human beings when they are completely, entirely open to cooperating with divine grace. It is a foretaste of the general resurrection.
It proves that the physical body matters and that it has an eternal destiny.
And the text brings all of these massive theological threads together by pointing to a very quiet, specific moment on the cross.
Okay, set the scene for us.
Christ, in his final moments, looks down at his mother and his beloved disciple. He says to her, "Woman, behold thy son," and to the disciple, "Behold thy mother."
And the tradition doesn't just read that as, a dying son making sure his mom has a place to live.
No, it's read on a cosmic scale.
Okay.
The Orthodox tradition sees that exact moment as the point when the Theotokos becomes the mother of the whole church.
Of everyone.
Of every single person who follows her son. Her maternal boundary expands to encompass all of humanity.
Which really brings us full circle today. We started by looking at that intense, high-stakes linguistic battle back in 431 AD over the word Theotokos.
Over one word.
One word. We saw how defending her title wasn't just about honoring her, it was about defending the literal reality that the infinite God became physical flesh.
Right. We examined how she wasn't a passive lottery winner, but the active, consenting boundary between the created universe and the uncreated creator.
We looked at the poetry that elevates a human woman above the highest angels, purely because of her radical obedience and physical closeness to God.
And we clarified how her role as the ultimate intercessor is based on the intimacy of family communion, not some sort of corporate bureaucracy, all culminating in her dormition as a prototype for the ultimate potential of the human body and soul.
So what does this all mean?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, whether you are a practicing believer living inside this framework, or you're simply a student of human thought, history, and philosophy, this text offers a breathtakingly complex, deeply optimistic view of humanity's potential.
It really is optimistic.
It shows the sheer universe-altering power of human free will when it chooses to cooperate with a higher purpose.
It truly elevates the human experience to a cosmic level. But as we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final lingering thought from the very end of Metropolitan Konstantinos' text.
It's a great point to end on.
We haven't touched on it yet, but it's a brilliant, challenging way to end the deep dive. The author notes that believers place their hope in her intercession today, just as she interceded at the wedding at Cana.
Right, a pivotal biblical moment.
Yeah, and if you recall that biblical story, it's a very quiet, behind-the-scenes moment. The wine runs out at a wedding, which, is a massive social disaster in that culture.
A huge deal.
And Mary simply points it out to Jesus. She subtly prompts him to perform his very first miracle. Think about the mechanics of that dynamic for a moment.
The human prompting the divine.
Exactly. What does it actually mean for the trajectory of divine action for a miracle itself to be prompted by the subtle, intimate request of a human mother? How does that completely redefine the balance of power between humanity and the divine in everyday life?
It's a profound thought.
It's just something to mull over the next time you look at the structure of any belief system and try to figure out which columns are doing the heavy lifting. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.
Thank you very much for your time. See you soon.